those in spring training and in Topeka, in this passing few nights of apparently addressing the television audience about some of the matters, about whatever the hell this might be about. And I was still around the areas where we had been speaking about religion in the sense of it playing a most central role, but there is a particular way that Kyroots brought up tonight that bears on all of this. It's right toward the end, the story of a guy that says, from life's view, but certainly not from man's, it's not a matter of whether what you think is true or not. It's simply a matter of whether you think or not. And there'd already been some comments, if you were following, believe it or not, sometimes there is a certain continuity to the Kyroots. Yeah, I believe it. About absolute facts, because from secondary tongues, absolute facts are absolutely pathetic. And that's not criticism, because we certainly wouldn't say that in public, would we? Oh. And so you don't have to look out there, look at yourself. Anytime you go, my God, those people are idiots. If you develop it all, which you should be, the last Kyroot tonight should be, and the last Kyroot probably forever, was that in a particular, in a certainly curious manner, I assume you all get the inflection because it's an old cliche that Kyroot sort of put something funny into and did something curious with, but it says in a certainly unusual fashion, the revolution can only preach to the converted. Based upon the lack of immediate reaction then and now, perhaps none of you have heard that before, but it's not limited to religion. It's an old idea that a waste of time for any undertaking would be to simply preach to the converted. Like, who needs it? It'd be like for Republicans getting up calling for fiscal conservatism, for instance. That, you know, what's it going to accomplish if all you got's a bunch of yes men? If you're going to preach the converted, you're not accomplishing anything. And that's just, in the secondary world, that's an irrefutable, unfutable. Okay, fact. But from a more complex view, this kind of thing, which makes it extremely curious, can only preach the converted. You follow? I thought not. Well, in other words, if you're not already converted, what the hell? It's not going to make any sense anyway. But then if you want to take it further, you say, wait a minute, if I'm already converted, why do I need to listen? I don't know. Now back to where we were. So, now remember, there's already been some comments that Kyroot pointed out specifically. Anybody, the secondary mind, when it makes absolute statements, if you develop any sort of ear, if you're already converted, and you realize that the world, the secondary world, man's intellectual world, the singular world of man, operates at its own particular pace, at its own speed, and in its own certain way, wherein certain people, back in Kyroots stories, have wondered, is the problem whether they're actually serious in what they say and do, all the way from education to body and fender work to religion, philosophy? Are they serious? Is that the problem? Or are they putting me on? Am I the only person in the world? Am I the only dunderhead in the world that's taking what they're saying out there seriously and all the time criticizing it, trying to analyze it? Is the whole thing a joke, and I am the only mother's son that's not in on it? That everybody else on this planet, 14, what is it, billion, 9999999, they're all laughing about, talking about politics, economics, the ecosystems, the future of man, religion, psychology, and I am constantly, at least overtly or internally, railing against it, criticizing it, noting the flaws therein, when I am the only person on this planet taking this crap seriously. Everybody else is just simply smiling and they're going along. It's a joke. I'm the only one. I'm the only one taking it seriously. Is that the problem? Now back to the Kyroot that I was going to try to drag you into. It starts out and the man says, from life's view, but certainly not from man's. It's not a matter of whether what you think is true or not. It's simply a matter of whether you think or not. And then another guy says, how in the world, where do you come off in trying to speak for life? You know, the kind of statement that started out. It's almost the epitome of insane dogmatism from certain views for a man, anybody. Of course, you don't have to look at a Kyroot. All you got to do is walk down the street or go into a church or synagogue or look in your own brain, and somebody's always saying, ha! Da 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 da. So the guy points out, he says, who in the world are you to make a statement speaking for life? Of course, all the Kyroots and the way we talk around here, everybody lets it slide, but to say, from life's view, and whatever you say, if it seems to make sense, especially if it's something that you already thought, you'll let it go. And I don't mean it's just because you have such pity on my poor comments, because you could be religious. Seems to be different, of course, and you walk into a church or synagogue or mosque, and somebody says, well, God wants you to do so-and-so. And if you are wired up to be religious in that way, you'll want to take notes or go, my, yes, yes. And no one ever says, where'd you get off speaking for God? But let's take it back to a more non-metaphysical level. The guy says, from life's view, it's not a matter of whether what you think is true or not. All that life cares about is that you do think. And the other guy says, how in the world can you possibly speak for life? How do you say, well, from life's view? And then it got into the new play based upon that historical incident, that an actor says that from life's view, it's not a matter of whether what you think is true or not, but it's just a question of, it's a matter of whether you do think. And the second actor says, how in the world can you speak for life like that? And the actor says, well, it's not simply me speaking. The evidence is right before you. That is, that everybody does think. And the second actor is probably even more incredulous. He goes, yeah, but this thinking out there, the stuff out there, a large part of it is not true. And the first guy says, there is the final proof. If there were electrochemical direct hand gestures, then that should be it. That is so dastardly, even ordinary people, I don't have any reason, any idea why they would want to entertain such as this, but that is almost irrefutable. I mean, it doesn't mean anything other than probably give them an extreme headache. It is based upon, by the way, the absolute demand, as you can observe for yourself, I don't have to simply speak for life, that speech is now the fourth absolute minimum requirement. That is like a new level of taking the old, already established, we're just accepting the previous descriptions of the great three S's that we're calling running the primary world of sex, shelter, and sustenance, just to stay alive if you had no brain, if you had no talking end of the nervous system. But now, almost anywhere on this planet that's worth constructively speaking of, it now requires that you speak. You cannot be a human. You cannot be alive without speech. But then, as it should be, you have now a great hobby. You've always had the hobbies. The first hobbies, you could say, grew out directly of the three S's of the primary world. That is, of dining becoming the hobby of eating, and eroticism becoming the hobby, the secondary hobby and reflection of sex, and etc. And then homes, places of residence, are the secondary hobby of getting in out of the cold. Then speech itself takes on a hobby aspect. And the hobby is still involved with this. The discussion amongst people is the movement of energy. The discussion amongst people, a man makes some statement, here's what I think. Another man says, are you serious? You think that? And the man says, well, yes, I do. As a matter of fact, I have a degree in that subject. And the man says, well, where from? The Peanut Butter School of Law at night or some... In other words, it is a continuing byplay. It is a kind of continuing almost warfare. It is the movement of energy between people saying, well, all right, what you think is not correct. When, from a greater view, the way this started out tonight, there was a man in the Kyroots story said from life's view, but not from man's. From life's view, it's not a matter of whether what you think is, quote, true or not. The only matter is whether you actually think. That's the only question. And the second guy says, that cannot be. Well, to begin with, where do you get off speaking for life? You saying, well, that's what life thinks. And the first guy says, all right, forget me saying that I said that. Look around you. The evidence is right before you. That is, the evidence is that everybody does think. And the second guy, being no idiot, he's saying that's no evidence, because part of what people think, everybody, part of what they think is not true. And the first guy says, there is the final proof. Not evidence, there is the final proof. Kyroot had the decency not to go any further, if there is any further to go. Because what's the second guy going to say other than, well, something intelligent like, well, hey, fuck you. Something like that. That's all you can do. Well, let's take the historic way out, that when you're confronted with that sort of thing, what can you do? You either take a nap, you get angry, or you laugh. It is, if we're still preaching to the converted, because there's no way to talk to ordinary people about this, because I'm sure that there's plenty of ordinary people that could hear something like this from any sort of venue, and if they were interested at all and had a few moments, they might say, well, let's debate this, let's discuss it. But the fact that it doesn't matter from life's view what people think. It's not a question about, well, wait a minute, we've got a whole bunch of people over here, thinks life, especially over there around the Adriatic. I don't want to be specific, hurt anyone's feelings, step on their nationalistic roots. But we got many people over there that what they're thinking is not true. Life doesn't care. I'm not going to have to go through it again like, who in the hell are you to say what life does? All right, look at this. Everybody thinks. Yes, but a lot of what they think is not true, says part of life. Remember, this is part of life, including some of the people around the Adriatic and other strange areas, not excluding Siberia and Kansas. And they say, yes, everybody thinks, but about half of what they think probably is not true. And, of course, the tacit insinuation from some person's view, because that's some person that would respond to playing the second part in this new play, is at any particular moment half of humanity's brains. Half of them are saying, wait a minute, a large part, or some part of what other people think, read 50%, half of what half the people half the time think is not true, according to half the people. That's what keeps things going. And they say, so you're not proving anything to me to say that everybody thinks. Sure, everybody thinks, their brains operate, but hell, half of what they think half the time is not true. There is the proof. What else do you want? For me to say, or for that guy in Kyroots to say, life does not care. From life's view, it doesn't care. It's not involved with, are humans thinking things that are true and correct, proper, scientifically valid, etc., proper, good, decent? Or are they thinking things that are hogwash, insane, nuts, against my will, if life had a will? People normally, of course, say this about the gods and religion. But here's the proof. Not evidence. See, the guy started out and he tried to be nice. He said, the evidence is right before you. That is, everybody thinks. And, of course, Actor 2 wouldn't let it be. Because ordinary people are not supposed to let it be. And he said, wait a minute, that's no proof. Or he says, that you're not making the point. Because you're saying that the evidence is that everybody does think. But number 2 points out, yes, thinks he, says he, from his proper position, half of what people think, some part of what people think, is incorrect, is not true. In a real good Kyroot, in another world, at another time, Actor 1 would not have had to come back and even say the last line. You would have done it yourself, like, The fact that, let's take Actor 2, let's take that view, that a good part of what people think is not true. That's not true. Where do you go off saying that? At any rate, let's just take that view. Let's assume, because half the people of the world, half the time, at any particular time, say that at least half the other people, half the time, are thinking things that are not true. So if that many people say it, who are we? A handful, schmucks here and there to say that's not true. If they say it's true, let's adopt that. They say it's true, that a good part of what people think is not true. What's a good gesture that means coda, the end? Except ordinary people where we were, some might want to discuss it and say, well, wait a minute, that's getting, you know, if they had some kind of passing heat stroke, moment of lucidity, and they might go, that is interesting. If life did care, if there was some standard when we're talking about the talking end of man's nervous system, a place where he is growing, if life had some vested immediate interest in what the cargo was, and what the goods were, not the services, well, wait a minute, it's not enough that people think, people have got to think the right thing. If that was of any importance to life, Jesus give us a break. Life is had. Far be it for me to be a critic of life, but that ordinary people, according to their reports, humanity on this planet has had several thousand years. Life has had several thousand years to get its act together. I mean, what kind of big deal if life can make humans, volcanoes, Edsels, CDs? You would think after 3,000 years that if it was important that man finally get this straight. Now, you people, you're not doing bad all of your thinking. Life is now saying, I'll go along with Actor 1. Everybody is thinking. But come on, think things that are true. Half of some part of what you guys are thinking is not true. May I play attorney and rest my case and say, there you are. Now, this is no great working revelation out in life because it's not going to have any impact. Of course, we're not trying to, because ordinary people cannot hear that. Or if they did hear it, what are you going to do with it? All it would do if they thought about 1 second past, if they saw it just for a second, that, hey, that's true. I mean, it's just obvious. It's proof. It's not evidence. It's not because you said it, but something's fishy. Life doesn't care about the content of what people think. I mean, it's got everybody thinking, but half the people think the other half the time are not thinking things are true or correct or valid. And life hadn't come down and done anything about it. Things continue to grow, get better. The quality of CDs have improved even in our lifetime. And that's so went, so I would say progress is afoot. And so an ordinary man for 1 second could go, there is something strange there that we're all wrestling over the fact. It's some kind of hobby. It's like somebody who loves Chinese and somebody else loves Nouveau California cuisine, and they're having some kind of running gun battle, driving past each other's house and shooting each other. And, some kind of gang war over, what you're going to eat. Who the hell cares? Food's food. Thought's thought. No, you pushed it too far, didn't you? Well, as I started to say, even if an ordinary person saw it for a split second, it wouldn't do anything. And if they saw it 1 second, if they could see it 1 second past just seeing it, what would it create? They have a name for it. It'd be meaningless, but then it would fall into a kind of crevice of fatalism. Then they'd say, well, what the hell's the use? Which doesn't mean anything. I didn't mean to distract you, because there are people on this planet at any given time that could hear the idea that it doesn't matter what men think. All life wants you to do is think. There are people around, many of them are hermits. I'm talking about professional hermits. Professional soreheads from the Kyroots stories and that kind of thing. They would go, that's true. But notice, those people are not in positions of authority. Well, not since they did away with the Edsel. Those people, they are the anomalies of life. I just want you to see it's meaningless. Any ordinary person would agree that, it doesn't matter what people think, it's all a waste of time. Well, I'm not talking about that. But if an ordinary, sane person did get a glimpse of this, and that is strange, and if they got a glimpse of it 1 second past that, besides just, hey, that's weird, if they got just past that, what could they do with it? The only reason I brought up the fatalism part is nothing. Absolutely nothing. Because the mind run by binary energy, as it normally does, there is nowhere to go with that. Because the brain has got to believe that it's important what I think. In the same way that once you become civilized and secondary, you've got to believe that it's important what you eat. And from one view, all of you should be good enough by now to laugh in a certain way, not laugh at somebody else. There's nothing wrong with eating being a hobby, dining, I should say. But eating is not a damn hobby. And assuming that you're sane and you're going to eat something that will not kill you, that you'll normally be attracted to eat that which you need. That's it. It's no hobby. It's nothing to discuss. At the primary level, there is no discussion. Life, humans are not saying, well, it's important that you eat true food. That is, food that's correct, food that's valid. Don't be eating false food. All right, see, now you laugh. And I know that there are versions, I'm not going to go into this because you got to be this good, but you can do it with sex and everything else. And people say, well, wait a minute. There's proper sex and improper sex. You know, if you want a mental hobby, that you got one. And of course they are. There are people out fist fighting again, driving past each other's houses, at least parabolically, firing at one another. Have been for thousands of years. How dare you? I heard that you do so and so. Well, maybe I did once. Ooh! Arrest that man. Kill him. Put him in jail. I just wanted you to see at the primary level, if we could separate it, which we can enough to talk about, it's not a question of, well, a man should eat, but it's very important. You should only eat true food. Take it into the intellect, which really gets strange because the intellect cannot see it otherwise at the ordinary level. And if you told it, listen, all you got to do is think. That's all life wants. It doesn't care what you think. The intellect would die. It would be a form of suicide. It would be almost as if your stomach, if you can follow this right quick, if we went back to the primary and the food, and if you tried to tell the primary, listen, it's very important that you eat only true food. And when I say true food, this is getting a little funny, because I don't mean eat true food as opposed to trying to eat plastic fruit from Woolworth. But if you said you can only eat food that in some way is valid, that's true, as opposed to false food, you know, the stomach would go, what are you, crazy? But what if you could get the stomach involved? Still assuming that at the primary level you're hungry and you need certain food, you need certain vitamins, you suddenly have a desire for green food, you need some vitamin A, whatever it is, and you go for it, but your stomach has already been indoctrinated in the same way that your mind has been in a certain way, and indoctrinated is in 114 sets of quotation marks because we're running out of tape. And if you've got the stomach to believe, wait a minute, you can't just eat food, you have to eat true food. You'd die. Or you'd be in worse shape than you might be physically in already. But you tell the intellect that. But you don't even have to tell it. It's born that way. It operates that way. That wait, thinking's not enough. You've got to think the right thing. And well, I knew that. Try to tell it otherwise. But hey, it doesn't matter. What do you mean it doesn't matter? Because why else would it live if it didn't matter? We've got 1 finger, 1 minute left. And I'd like to spend this time by leading us astray. Well, I started to say in a hymn or in a marching song. If we had an address, I'd tell you again to send in something. But we don't have an address, and I forget what it is that people are supposed to send in. So, good night, and see if Austin City Limits is on another station.